with a hash map.
Okay.
The hash map is just refactoring to improve the internal structure of the code,
Okay.
but it wouldn't affect the overall kind of the behavior of the game.
Okay.
So it's up to you.
Okay.
I mean, either way.
Okay.
Once you do the refactoring, everything else should work as usual. So it's up to you to decide.
Okay.
Okay.
Like either one would work.
Yeah, it should work, right? So it's you will need to do some changes in the room class since I'm asking you to add enemies and to add power-ups. So those have to be linked to the room, right? So right now you can see there's a Boolean variable called person in room, okay? And this is how that the game represent the fact that this person is in a certain room or not, okay? So this variable, the attribute in this room, indicates whether the person is in the room or not, okay? Now this attribute is picked by a renderer to render the person. So you can, if you take a look at the code of renderer, you can see that once all of the walls are rendered, it's trying to test whether there is a person in the room, okay? And if there is a person in the room, then it will draw a person in that room, okay? So I'm not sure if you have a question, but let's build on this idea. Let's say, for instance, you want to represent an enemy in the room, okay?
Okay.
So you can do it similar to having a person in the room. We can create a Boolean variable, a Boolean attribute called person in room. Enemy in room. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now this attribute has to be set depending on the game logic, right? Like depending on how you want to put the enemies in the room. In this particular example, I'm just going to randomly place enemies in some of the rooms. Okay, so let's assume there is a 10% chance to get an enemy in a room. So the way I'm going to do it is to generate a random number, and if this number is less than, it's between 1 to 10. If this number is 1, then I will create an enemy in the room.
Okay.
And if not, it will, so I will assign this randomly. So I'm going to import util.random. I can do it with either random, or there is another way to do it is to call the random method from the math class. And this, I think you don't need to import anything. So I can do the following. I can try to generate a random number between 0 and 1. Let's call it probability. A random. So math.random will give you a random number between 0 and 1. And what I'm going to do, if probability is less than 10%, then I'm going to set enemy in room to true. Otherwise, I'm going to set it to false. Okay. Now, in your case, I think you will need to think about how you are going to place those enemies in the maze eventually. This could be one strategy, but you may want to implement a get and set method to get and set enemy in the room. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create a Boolean get. Since this is a Boolean variable, instead of get, the convention is to use is. So is enemy in room. Okay, and I'm just going to return enemy in room. Okay. And I'm going to also create a set method, set enemy in room. And this will take a Boolean parameter, and it will set the attribute enemy in room to be equal to that parameter. Okay? So now when we create the maze, let's create a maze size. Some of those rooms would have an enemy, and some of them will not have enemy. And you don't know actually. So for instance, let's take a look at the first room. Is there an enemy in the room? No, it's false, right? How about the second one? False. So how about the third one? It's also false. Okay, false. False. Okay. True. Okay. So I'm just randomly kind of spraying enemies in this room. Okay. Now this is just from a representation perspective, from a modeling perspective. Still, if you create a renderer and you render your maze, you're not going to get any enemy rendered, because the render class does not know how to represent the enemy. All right. So let's say you want to represent the enemy with a square or a circle or whatever. This is the presentation side. You can do that in this part of renderer to render, if there is an enemy in the room, you can render it using that render method. Okay. So right now, if we render maze M, and if you refresh, you're not going to get any. What did I do? Refresh. Program is already running. I think it's already refreshing. So you're not going to get any enemy drawn, simply because even if this enemy exists in the model component, we still need to present it to visualize it. Okay? That's just taking a long time. So and the way to do it is to implement the code to visualize it in this part in render room. So notice that in render room, we render 4 walls, and then we render a person if the person exists. Okay?
So you do like a very similar method to render person for the renderer?
Yeah, so I'm going to do the same thing for render enemy.
Okay.
Once I know what's going on here. Okay. I mean, either it's slower than usual. Okay, so let me refresh now. So as you can see, there are no enemies. There are also no person, because I haven't set any person to be in those rooms. So what I'm going to do now in renderer, I'm going to render the enemy if the enemy exists. Okay. So similar to is person rendering a person, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to, let me actually copy and paste it, because the second half of it is the same. If there is an enemy, if enemy in room, I want to draw an enemy. Okay. Otherwise, I still want to draw this white square to make the cell empty, look empty, right? So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to do the following. I will try to draw an enemy. Now notice that if I keep the code like as is, what's going to happen is that the program will draw a person for each one of the enemies. Okay? So if I do something like this, when I start the game, what you will see many persons drawn in addition to the player, because those persons are actually representing the enemies. Okay. So what I need to do is just to change this code, which is instead of drawing a person, I want to draw a different shape, right? So those are the enemies.
All right, yeah.
and what I want to do now is, instead of drawing those, person shapes, I want to draw. Okay, I don't know what's going on here. I want, instead of drawing a person shape, I want to draw a different kind of shape. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the following. Go to render, and let me actually switch the order between person and enemy. So I will draw the enemy first, and then I will draw the person. Instead of doing person P equal to person, let's pick another shape. How about a circle? Or, it's up to you, depending. I think I said circle.
Yeah, I think you said
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a circle. C or E for enemy, doesn't make a difference. Then I need to create a new circle. Okay. All right. So new circle. And then I want to make the circle visible at the end. All right. Now what's missing here is that I want to change the position of this circle to be in this location of the current room. All right. So similar to what I have done here for the person, I want to move the circle to X and Y location. All right. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to move the circle, to place it in the current, in the location of the current room. All right. So I'm just going to do one small modification of the circle class, because instead of moving it, I just would like to create a circle with those default X and Y position and diameter. Now you can see that they're all defaulted at 68, 230, and 19 circle. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create another constructor that will take X, Y, and size, and maybe color also. So instead of changing those after creating the circle, the second constructor would allow me to create a circle in the desired location and the desired size. Okay. So Y position equal to Y, and diameter would be equal to size, and then color will be equal to C, right? So in renderer, now I can create a circle and pass the current X location, Y location, and then the size should be, I think, room size over 2. And then the color would be red, since we're creating those evil circle with red color, okay? And then once I do that, I can make the circle visible, okay? So if there is an enemy, then we will draw this circle. If this is a person, we will draw a person. So let's examine the new the new version of this renderer. The circles may be slightly off, so I may want to adjust those parameters a bit. But let's see.
So the variables X location and Y location are already defined for like the rooms?
So if you read the code for, I can't see the circles, so apparently there is an issue. So if you read the code here, you can see that X location and Y location, they map the coordinate of the room to the coordinate of the canvas. Okay, so those are already defined for you. And let me see what's going on. Okay. render person and then render enemy. If r.enemy in the room, I need to create a new circle, and then I want to make it visible. So I'm not sure what's going on. So actually I'm going to put a breakpoint to see. Okay. So this room there is an enemy. So you can see that X location is 120 and Y location is 0. Okay, so I want to create a circle with X and Y location. Room size is 30, so it would be, the diameter would be 15. X location is 120 and Y location is 0. And then I'm making it visible. Okay. Otherwise, okay, and then draw the person in this room. So let's do that one more time with the renderer, mesh size 25. Okay. So I see what's going on in here. The problem is that it's drawing a white square. Whenever the person is not in the room, it's drawing a white square, right, to white out that room. So the problem is that when I only had one object in the room, which is a person, I assumed that if there is no person in the room, then the room should be white from inside. Now the problem is that we have two possibilities, either a person or a circle, right? So this else part no longer works because I don't want to white out the room if there is no person in it. It could have been occupied by an enemy.
Okay, so
Okay.
this would be like another if statement, like if the person's not in the room and if the enemy is not.
Correct. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to check if not enemy in the room and not person in the room. No one is in this room. So we draw a white square to white this room. Okay. So let's see now with this new incarnation. Hopefully this will resolve the issue. All right, so those are the circles. And you can see that they're not placed very well in the room, so maybe I want just to nudge them a bit to place them squarely in the room. But in almost 10% of the rooms, we've got like 25 times 25, which is 625 rooms. So 10% is like almost 60 circles we have randomly placed. Okay? So you can nudge their location for them to be in the center of the room. So now you have the circle presented in the model, but also in the presentation. Now that does not change the behavior of the game. Like when the person bumps into a circle, nothing happens, right? So we still need to change the control aspect to implement the logic that, if the person bumps into a circle, it's going to be, game over. Okay. Now it seems that there is another issue here, which is that apparently when there is an evil circle and a person, that cell does not get white out, so you get still you see the trace of the person here. Okay. It's kind of producing an interesting behavior. You can see the trace at each one of those circles. You see, the problem here is that I'm only whitening out the room if there is no enemy or no person. And once the person occupies a room and moves out of it, it will just leave the trace because this, cell wouldn't be white out in the beginning. So I think another strategy to do it is basically to erase a room before drawing either an enemy or a person. Do something like this. So when we start rendering the cell, just create a white, square to remove everything, and then if there is an enemy, draw an enemy. If there is a person, draw a person. Okay. And I'm also going to nudge the circle a bit, just for it to be in this exactly the center of the room. So I'm going to add room size over 2 plus room size over 2 for both x and y, so that I place the circle in the room, in the center of the room. Okay, so now I should be able to see the circles in the center of the room, and hopefully the person wouldn't leave a shadow when the person moves in between rooms. Okay, it's not exactly in the center. I think it's now down in the bottom right. So it should have divided over 4 instead of over 2. Okay, but the person is not leaving a shadow now. Okay, so person moving in between the rooms, and we've got some circles here. Okay. I'm just going to make my nudge to room size over 4, and hopefully next time it's going to be in the center of the room. Now let's say when a person bumps into a circle, the game is over. Where do we implement this,
Would you want to do it? So, is that be? Would it be in like the game method?
Right. So
I have one question though.
Yes.
When did you put the square as equals new square? Did you put that at the very top?
Right. So first. Or I can do it in the very top, same thing. So basically I want to white out the room, erase the room, and then draw it again. And this is basically how render works. Whenever a room changes, what happens is that it's just redrawing the room one more time. What did I do here? Okay. So I'm going to give it another name, S1. Okay, so I can put it on the top, just erase, and draw it again. To draw the room, we draw the walls if they exist, and then we draw the enemy if it exists, and the person if it's in the room. Okay, and then we refresh the whole thing. So, getting back to that question, actually you can implement this logic in many places. You can do it in here. You can say, for instance, if the enemy and the person is in the room, you can do something like this, system out, print line, game is over, and then quit the game, okay? And then you can quit the game, or whatever, let's say you want to exit, the program to exit, all right? And now that could work for the current purpose, for this special purpose of the game, it's not a good practice because you are implementing business logic or a game logic in the presentation module or class in your program, all right? So renderer, the presentation, the class doing the presentation, shouldn't make any decision about the game. It should be very kind of passive, taking a look at the model and rendering it or presenting it to the user. Making that decision in this aspect, it's possible. I think the game would work. It's just it's not a good design practice because whoever is working on the project is under the impression that renderer is just rendering the game. Okay. So your kind of answer is doing it in game is a better idea because game is doing all of those game, implementing all of those game rules. Testing whether, for instance, testing whether the player has reached the final room, and if the player, managed to exit the maze, you'll print congratulations, you managed to exit the room and so on. So now you can see the person here. Once we hit an evil circle, the game will be over, okay, basically. All right, but let's take out this and implement it in a different place. I'm going to do it in game. So those are the business, the game rules, the logic of the game. So rule number one, when the person, reaches the exit room, the game is over and it's success. Okay. So that's rule number one, and what we can do here, we can keep adding rules, right? So rule number two, when the person bumps into an enemy, now it's up to you. Like maybe the person has a life, like specific number of lives, you want to deduct one. Maybe it's immediately game over. But this is the place to implement this rule. Let's say the game is over and it's, it's just a failure or whatever. So what we can do here, we can implement a very similar rule. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to copy and paste this one and make sure that I need to change this if statement.
You're going to say if the location, if like r dot, well, you have to say if the location of the two is true for the same room.
So notice that in the game here, we have access to X and Y and maze, right? So every time when we move, we can get the room that, we can get room X and Y, and this will give us the room object at the current location. Okay? So what we can do here after moving, we can test whether we can extract the room. Okay, we get the room at location X and Y, and then we can, basically do that. We can test whether person is in the room and enemy in the room. I mean, we know that the person is in this room, so this will be redundant, but we can, still do that. Is person in the room and enemy in the room? Then this is a case of a failure, right? So maze.getRoom X and Y will give us the current room that the person is in, and then we can do the test here. So next time we run the game, I should get to that. I think the problem is that there are too many enemies, so I think it will be very difficult to, let's see. So see, we're unlucky because it just bumped into a circle in the beginning. So maybe we should be careful when you create a circle, just not to put a circle immediately in. And there are too many of them. But basically, that's the game logic here, right? Sorry, you lost, and the game is over. Okay. All right. So to model an enemy, we had to do three things. We had to change the model of the room object to incorporate the fact that there is an enemy in the room now. It's a possibility that there is an enemy in the room. And next, we had to change the presentation part to add that renderer to render those enemies as circles. And then we had to change the control to implement the game logic, which is that when the player bumps into an enemy, it's going to be a game over. Okay? So change the model, change the presentation, and change the control. All right? Now those enemies don't move, so you will need to think about making them move in your project.
That was very helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like, how do you, for hitting the space bar that destroys the walls in the current room, but not destroying the exterior walls, are the walls defined as like which ones are exterior?
So the walls are not. You don't. When I meant by exterior, I meant the border of the maze, right? So you've got in main here, well, not in main. When you run the game, you can see that there is, the exterior walls of that maze. I'm just meaning, you can't break and go up, disappear. That's basically what I'm saying. But the walls themselves are represented with those attributes, or in the hash map, in the case, if you have a hash map. All right. So that's another, logic here. You can see when you take a look at the control, you can see that they are different in this in this game loop. We're trying to read the keystroke, and then depending on the keystroke, we want to move the player in that direction. Okay. So we can, if you want to extend it to work for the space, you can do it in here, right? So you want to test whether the player has hit space, and if the player has hit the space, then you want to do something, right? So what we can do here, we can define a Boolean called space and set it to false. Now the key is coming from this method called getLastKey, which Canvas implements. Okay. And I don't think it reports space, so I'm gonna go to Canvas and see what we have here. In Canvas, I think the keys are left, right, up, down, and none. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a space to it, and I need to go down, and I can send you the code afterwards. Don't worry about typing it. I need to go to the part where it's testing for the key. So I'm going to add another else if here. Else if key is equal. So basically, the key event is a class coming from the J option pane and kind of trying to get the space. So I'm going to check the documentation to see what's the value for space. Space bar, VK space. I'm going to do VK space. And very similar to this part, I'm going to print line, the text plus space, and then I'm going to return the value space. Okay. So this is just a simple extension to whatever Canvas is doing right now by adding a space key. Now, if I run the game, you can notice now the game senses the space, but it's not doing anything when we press a space. So if I hit space, you can see that it's saying space, right? See? So now we have an idea when the player is hitting the space bar. So what I can do here, similar to what I have done for the keys, I can test whether I can move is the key. So if move equals to key dot space, okay, and I can do the same basically. Space is equal to true, and then I can reset the key. All right. Now, just for the sake of being consistent, I'm going to do this also as an else if, which means I'm testing for whether the key press was down, up, left, right, or space. If it's a space, I'm going to set space to be true. Okay. Now, this is trying to move the player. Let's implement the third rule, which is rule 3, hitting space destroys walls. Okay?
And, okay,
yes?
Can you, explain, so the keystrokes, if it's basically, if it knows that, it's actually saying if space, are you talking about space is hit, like there's not a place to go, and that's what the keystroke, like what is the keystroke that we're using, like the key equals, what does that say?
This part, you mean?
Yeah.
Or this, or?
So that's just getting the last key, and then when we were in the,
this if part?
their class.
Oh, in Canvas?
Yeah.
So, okay, in Canvas, there are two parts of it. The first one, there is this key, which is an enumerated data type I haven't covered in class, but basically this is a data type that can be one of those values, right? Either left, right, up, down, none space. So when I say integer I could be any value from minus 32 million to plus 32 million, right? Here you're defining your own type, which can be one of those values, left, right, up, down, none to space, okay? This could have been an integer if I use convention that left is equal to 1 and right is equal to 2 and so on, okay? So this is just my own data type. And I think the complication is in here. This is the part which is trying to interact with a keyboard by listening to an event called key pressed. So this is slightly complicated because we haven't covered GUI programming, and we haven't covered events. But basically, you're listening for a key press events when you press a key, and you're trying to see what the press key was. Like I'm only interested in left, right, up, down, and space. And if this is the case, what I'm doing, I'm updating a local variable called last key. You can see there is a local variable in Canvas called last key. Not a local, I mean an attribute actually, in Canvas called last key, and its value is equal to the key pressed. It should be somewhere here. Okay, so this is the attribute. Initially we start with none, but if the player hits any key, it's going to be one of those keys that we are interested in. But long story short, this key is communicated to the game class by invoking the method get last key. All right. So from the perspective of game, we invoke the method get last key, and we get one of those keys. Okay. So last key is one of those key, and now depending on the last key, we can, do our, implement the logic here. So let's say, for instance, if the last key is space, if it's actually space, I'm not going to break rules at this point. I'm just going to, show a message, maybe. Okay, boom. And notice that in this game you have the power up to use once. Now, so far there are no limit on using this power up. So every time you hit space, you'll get, you know, the rule of that space implemented, executed. Yeah, it's just write game. Okay, so when I hit space, I get this boom. Okay.
So then would it be something where, so could you say in the game class, like, if space, it shows you that message, and then you can say, you can like remove the square?
You want to break the wall, right?
Okay.
So what is your plan for breaking the wall?
Like what is the, like you would just want to remove the square from that, like.
Which square? So the room, each wall in the room is actually 30 squares stacked together. Are you talking about those little squares?
No, you want, so they're blowing out the walls for like whatever when they're face.
Right, so the four walls, the player does not have any directionality, right?
Okay.
So it's not facing any wall. When you hit space, all of the four walls, I mean, up to the four walls will disappear.
So then would you want to say, like, you would want to receive input as to which?
No, it's gonna break all of the walls.
All of them, okay.
Yeah.
So just get rid of all of them?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
So you are in this room. If I hit space, all of those four walls will disappear, right?
Okay.
That's the idea, because this is a two-dimension player. There is no sense of, you know, facing. It's the same person moving, right? If it's like, if there is a way to turn around the face, you know, in a 3D setting, could have been, you know, possible to select this wall. So I'm going, just to simplify, to remove all of those four walls.
Okay.
Can you think about a way to remove maybe one of them for now?
Okay. And then, so you would just say, hit the space, and then you could call, like, get where the person is located, and then get the same location for that square.
Right, so we have to get the current room, you're right. We have to get the current room that the person is, oh, we have it already. We have R, which is the current room that the person is in. So what do you want to do with R?
Okay, so R is the X and Y variables for the person. So you want to get the X and Y, no, so you have a X and Y variables for the person, and then you want to take those variables and remove the square for that location.
Yep. I want to remove the walls.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, it's a square, but I mean, and even a room which has 4 exits is basically a square with no walls, right? So take a look back at this room object, right? Because this is where you wanna see which one of those attributes will, if it changed, will change the, you know, the fact that there are walls or not.
So you have to look at how many walls it has and then remove.
So I'm really simplifying it. I'm removing all of them, so I don't care how many.
Okay.
So forget about all walls. Let's say we want to take down south walls.
Okay. So, well, everything's private in those spots.
Well, you can change it. You can edit
I
it.
know what I'm saying, but like to access.
Okay. So let's take a look at this class. What's the attribute you want to change, basically?
To be able to get rid of.
Yeah. Let's only do south exit for now.
You want to true for all of them, there's all exits, is that what you're saying?
So south exit is a variable of type room. This is the variable that points to the next room. If there is a wall, this variable is what?
It doesn't.
It's null. Okay. So let's do the following. Let's create one room, 1, 1, and let's create a second room called 1, 2. And if you inspect either one of those rooms, you can see that all of the exits are null, which means each one of those rooms is just a cell, 4 walls. If I want to take out a wall, let's say I want to make room 1 west to room 2. So what I can do, I can set exits null, and then east will be room 2. So I'm saying room 2 will be east to room 1, and then those will be null. Okay. So when I inspect room 1, you can see that the east exit is now leading to room 2. So
You
let.
have to change the exits.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So let's do the south wall. Assuming there is, let's take out the south wall. Well, let's take it out before the message. Take out south wall. So what you basically need to get, you have your current room, right? You want to get the room south of it, okay? South to R. This one is easy because you can get the method, you can get south exit, right? You can call room.get south exit, and you get the south exit, all right? Now, if south exit is null, it means there's a wall. You have to take it, right? If south exit is not null, it means there is no wall. So, I mean, nothing to do, right?
Okay.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to test whether south exit is null, which means there is no exit, which means no exit means there is a wall. Okay?
Then you're gonna change it to, you change it, have to change it to the, like, the room next to it?
Right. Okay, so what's the room next to it?
Is there a method like get neighbor?
No, you can do it. But you can either do it in room, you can think about writing a method
Oh,
called.
but it's like the x, is it like x plus 1? Like
All right,
multiplication plus
very
1?
good. Is it X? South, going south.
Or south, okay, south is y plus, y minus 1.
No, Y plus 1.
Y plus 1?
Because we're going, left to right. The convention is that that room in the top left is 0, 0,
Okay.
right? So we need to get the room next to it. So next room is going to be maze.get room X and Y plus 1. Okay, so this is the next room. Now you want to set the south exit of room. So room.set. So there's a method called set exits. I mean, if you have implemented the hash map, you would have a method called set exit, and you can set exit south and room.
Okay.
I'm just going, for the purpose of this, I'm going to write a method just quickly called set south exit, because I don't want to do the whole refactoring thing. So I'm going to do set south exit, room south exit, and what I'm going to do, south exit is equal to s exit. Okay, so this is a setter method to change the south exit of the room. Okay. Oh, this should be void. This is a setter method. Okay. Now, when I go back to game, I'm going to do the following: set south exit and going to be next room. So basically, I'm relying on the fact that there is a maze is rectangular. I know the room south of me is x and y plus 1. And I'm going to set the south exit of this room. Now, it's up to me if I want to refresh those rooms. As I think the room would refresh in the next cycle, but this wouldn't, it doesn't hurt to render both, the two rooms together. Oh, and you also need to set the north exit of next room. Otherwise, it will be a one-way exit. All right? So similarly, we will do something for north exit. Because otherwise, the person can go south, but the person cannot go back north, okay? So I'm going to do north exit. Okay, so similar, this is the setter method for north exit, all right? So in my end game, I'm going to do nr set north exit to r, okay? And now I'm asking the renderer to render, okay, let's do it here. Renderer, render room R and NR, okay? So basically I broke the wall, so I'm going to render both of the two rooms, okay? And I think that's it. I can do it after or here. It doesn't, I think, doesn't make a difference. So basically, I'm linking to remove the wall. I'm linking this room to the room south of it. Okay. And renderer would know when there is. You can see that renderer relies on the fact that this attribute is not null north. It knows how to render the wall. All right. So nothing else. I change the model. I ask the presentation to refresh, and everything should. I'm not concerned about drawing little squares, right? Because renderer knows how to do that, how to handle that. All right. So hopefully it will work this time. When I hit space, the south wall should be taken out, and also. I mean, so you have to think about doing it for the four walls, not the south wall, and you have to check also whether the player is in a boundary cell, because you don't want to remove those walls. So I'm going to hit space. Okay. So the south wall was destroyed. There's something fishy now going on. Oops. Okay, boom. X, I think you're right. Did I do X and Y? No, X and Y plus 1. So when I'm hitting space, it's taking out two walls. Okay. Okay. So there's still something going on in here. I'm not sure what's going on. When you hit space, get south exit. All right. So I have to look into those. I'm getting the next X and then Y plus 1. Is it X? So my X, that's interesting. South exit. South exit next room. And then set north exit. Huh. All right, so let me see. I think X. I think you were right. X, is it X? Let me see. I think it's X plus 1. It's not Y plus 1. because X is counting the rows and Y is counting the columns. So when I go south, I want to increase the row, not the column. Hopefully this will resolve it. Because X is counting over the rows of the matrix, of the array, and Y is counting over the column. So when I want to go south, I need to increase the that row by 1, X by 1. Okay. All right, that worked. Okay. So one more space. Okay, so I can now, you can see that the south wall is broken.
Okay, and then really quickly, mine, I've been like typing along, mine is saying, on the game pass, it's saying, giving me the exception, catch without try.
All right, let me take a look at it. I